In 2018, the UK threw away 20 million slices of bread, equivalent to 1 million loaves every single day. Every day we throw away 4.4 million whole potatoes, 920,000 whole bananas, 1.2 million whole tomatoes, 720,000 whole oranges, 800,000 whole apples, 2.7 million whole carrots, the equivalent of 3.1 million glasses of milk, and so much more. WRAP's 2018 survey suggested that we threw away somewhere between 20 and 25% of all the food that was purchased either for at-home consumption or out and about in restaurants, cafes, etc. That is frightening. And what's worrying is that the last survey they did in July 2021 suggested that habits have not changed at all. So we're still throwing away the same amount of food. It did decrease at the beginning of the pandemic when we were all locked at home and had to use what we had because we couldn't necessarily get out to get more food. But steadily since April 2020, the levels have just been climbing. On this week's episode of The Next Delicious Thing, we're talking about the delicious things and not so delicious things that we are throwing away. I'm passionate about all topics around food, and this one in particular, I think is just so important. And there are lots of relatively simple things that we can do to make it easier not to be throwing things away. I sat down with my friend Chloe Stewart, who is the founder of Nibsetc, which is a business that upcycles food that would otherwise go to waste to create delicious and nutritious snacks. She understands so much more about this than I do, so I wanted to hear from her what exactly is going on and what we can do. I have a few things that I know, so it was a really interesting conversation. I hope you'll enjoy it. And if you stick around to the end, I will tell you a few of the things that I tried this week that you might want to add to the top of your list to try next. Here's my conversation with Chloe. I'm Jennifer Earle. Obviously, you call me Jen, and this is Chloe Stewart, and you can call her Chloe. I wanted to invite Chloe onto the podcast because Chloe has an incredible business that is very mission-led, helping to address the issue of food waste. I wanted to pick her brain about what she can share with us about how big a challenge this is and what she's doing, but also what we can do. I just find it so fascinating how big of an issue it is and how little we're doing about it, basically. Hopefully there can be some inspiring things in this conversation as well. So can you give us an indicator, Chloe, of how big, like how much are we throwing away? From my understanding, from a consumer's perspective, at a household level, we throw away the biggest percentage of everything that is thrown away in the UK, around the world, but particularly in the UK. There are some fantastic apps for home use. Olio, which helps to share food amongst households and also is collecting, some people collect food from supermarkets and other retailers. And then Too Good To Go, which is for retailers to use, but for consumers to collect things at a lower price at the end of the day so that they don't go in the bin. So I will link to both of those and highly recommend you download those. But there are also things that are thrown away all throughout the food chain. And that is what Chloe's business, etc., helps to solve. But firstly, can we just talk a bit about how big the issue is?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thanks for having me on the podcast.
Pleasure, darling.
Yes, the issue of food waste is vast, and it's good to know the facts, but it can quickly be overwhelming at like how vast the issue is and how then disconnected it feels, and how you then like, oh, well, why should I do anything? Because what does my small act do? For context, if food waste for a country, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases after only the US and China. The emissions of food waste account for about 8% of like human caused greenhouse gas emissions, which is huge, especially when you look at the aviation industry, which what does 8% really mean in the aviation industry? I found it's about 2%. So it's huge for food waste. And then if we look at a household level, if you do a big grocery shop and you get 5 bags of groceries, you're effectively throwing away 1 bag of those groceries over a year. That amounts to about £700 of money thrown down the drain in your food waste. Yeah, which is a significant amount. You know, you can do several holidays with those.
Yeah.
No,
well, less so now, but
yeah, maybe less so now. But you can do something with £700,
especially when you consider that clearly there are people who don't have that to throw away. So there are some
households who are throwing away a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, these are averages, and WRAP is a great place to get the most up-to-date information about food waste. Obviously, these reports aren't done every year, sadly. They should be. That's something I desperately wish was easier to find, reportings on where food is wasted and how much is wasted and why it's wasted. If we knew where that was and what was causing that, and owning those problems and where we're making mistakes in systems, it would help us, entrepreneurs, just people in general, like find solutions for that. Another crazy fact is that of the food produced, about a third of that is thrown away, and that's global. 1/3. If you imagine that all of that food would be enough to feed the world hungry 4 times over, it's insane.
When I opened the WRAP website, one of the first things they said, and I'm paraphrasing, but no one in the world should go hungry. And they said that sounds like an ideal principle, but it's actually true in that the amount of food, like you say, feed the world 4 times over. Obviously, there's distribution issues and things that might not make that as smooth and easy as it could be, but it's quite scary that the stat that I read said 70% of the food that is wasted actually happens in the home, which sort of makes sense in that retailers and manufacturers and hospitality are all very focused on their bottom line. But then they're also...
It's important to say that's post-farm gate. That's someone leaves the farm. A lot of waste happens on farms.
So this 100% figure doesn't include what is wasted in farms.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the waste that happens on farms is for a whole variety of reasons. Around Brexit, it was because there were staff shortages, and so the people that were left to pick, there just weren't enough of them to be able to pick everything that had grown, which is obviously devastating. It also happens because big supermarkets last minute changed their minds and say, oh, we don't need this order anymore, or oh, it's not right for us, or what have you, and so that leaves the farmers with not much to do. As they can't do anything with it, which is why companies like Oddbox are really great, because they work with these farmers to collect. That is the premise of their business, is to resell surplus or wonky for any of these reasons.
If people aren't aware, Oddbox is a food delivery, primarily fruit and vegetables subscription, and they take the food that the supermarkets don't take because it might be too small or too large or wonky.
Yeah, and it's very clever the way they do it. Waste subscribers, we love it. It comes with info sheets on why this fruit and veg is in here and where it's come from, and a lot of it is just surplus. Like there's just too much of it. They've either grown too much or orders have been cancelled, and so they just got too much. It's less the wonky at the moment.
That's interesting.
Like you said, it's not a blanket fix. There's a lot of food being produced. There are a lot of people going hungry, and it's not as easy as like putting that food that's being wasted into the hands of people who need it. Unfortunately, different parts of the world have different issues at different stages of supply chain, but the point is that there is enough food being produced for everyone on the planet. And when people are concerned about will we have enough food to feed the growing population on the planet, at the moment the numbers suggest that yes, and so surely efforts should be being put into maximizing the resources that we have, from the earth's resources to the processing resources to all the the byproducts, which is what this etc is really about, is making the most of the resources that we have. And in the production of juice or in the production of beer, you have a huge portion, juice specifically because that's what we're focusing on the moment, you have anywhere from a quarter to a third to even half, depending on the fruit veg you're pressing, of that is left over as pulp, and pulp is predominantly fiber. It is obviously a little bit of sugar, a little bit of flavor as well, and that fiber is really nutritious.
Yes, really nutritious.
So we can use that as an ingredient for another product, which is kind of what we're doing. And so the idea of Nibsetc etc is to really try and valorize cost inefficiencies in production and supply chains, and through that find sort of more affordable nutrition for like the snacks and products that we make.
That's what I really love about your business in particular, is the fact that we know that the UK and the US and many other countries are not getting enough fiber in their diet, and that's primarily because as a population we consume so many highly processed foods which are generally quite low or completely devoid of fiber, and you're creating snacky products that have that fiber put back in from a source where they're otherwise going to waste. And so typically that fruit pulp, it will go to either animal feed, right, or it can be going to straight into compost, so it's like maybe slightly less bad than putting it into landfill. But the issue with the food waste is that as it's decomposing, right, it's the gases that we don't want.
So if it ends up in landfill, then as it rots, it is emitting greenhouse gases rather than like feeding any kind of soil in the process. The reason why putting it in compost would be better is that then if it's in like a food, for example, doesn't need to be necessarily in like an anaerobic environment, unlike, you know, compostable packaging, which is not home compostable. So simply the sort of biodegradable compostable stuff needs to be in an anaerobic and temperature controlled.
That means without oxygen.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah.
In a temperature controlled vessel.
Yeah.
In order for it to decompose properly, and then, you know, for all the gases to be caught and used in the right way. Whereas if you're composting at home, your food or fruit pulp or veg pulp or whatever, that composter can be, you know, in a heap in the garden, and as long as you're sort of turning that regularly, that's okay, because of the sort of chemical composition that it will break down into, which is normally you're looking for sort of water and a bit of CO2, and that's kind of what it will end up with.
If the food waste is composted or given to animals or going into like an anaerobic digester where you're actually getting fuel off that as well, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, most of it's going. Well,
that was better summarized.
A significant portion is going into the bin, sadly. There are some packaging formats, so there are home compostable, and some plastics, or they're not coming from fossil fuels plastic, and you can put those in your home compost, and they're usually shouting that on the packaging that you can throw it into your home compost. So.
Yeah, and you do need to see, like, there is a difference between just compostable and home compostable. Normally the packaging will say if it's home compostable because it needs to be certified. But yeah, just to come back on the pulp, in our research we found that best case fruit veg pulp is ending up as animal feed or waste to energy. So you're getting energy from it. Worst case, it's ending up in landfill. The best case, and valorization studies do show that it is better sort of socially, economically, environmentally to upcycle and valorize side streams for human consumption. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yes, so Chloe makes delicious granola, which uses currently apple pulp from cider companies, but in the past you have also collected from smaller juice places as well, and there are plans for more, I believe. And also you're looking at other potential food waste as well.
Yes, the plan is to focus on juice pulp, and then as we grow, look at sourcing other byproducts and side streams all within the UK, because it makes absolutely no sense to be like shipping byproducts internationally.
Yes.
So seeing what we produce here and what side streams result from that, and how we can use that.
Is there anyone else using these byproducts, whether it's pulp or something else, that you're aware of at the moment? Are there other companies doing the same thing?
Globally, yeah. And in the US, they're kind of leading the charge on upcycled foods, which is really cool. There are some brilliant companies upcycling brewer's spent grain, the Akara byproduct of making soy milk, and so it comes from soybeans. There are also a company making biscuits and baking flours from the byproduct of pressing sunflower seeds for oil. So all sorts. And actually in Switzerland, there are a few more popping up. Around Europe, they're starting to pop up over the past couple of years. As far as I know, we are the first to commercialize the use of juice pulp in any product, and also be making upcycled snacks here in the UK. Toast Ale make beer from waste bread, like sandwich bread, from some of the biggest sandwich producers in the UK. So they're upcycling that. But yeah, in terms of upcycling byproducts into snacks, we're the only guys doing it at the moment.
Cool. Is there anything that consumers can do to help, apart from buy your product, of course, but like as mentioned, Oleo and Too Good To Go, the largest food waste items that I understand are potatoes. I was sent a great potato book last year, so if you need potato recipes, including sweet ones, put a link to that. And then bread is next. Also, better use of freezer, I think, can really help avoid foods being thrown away.
Yeah.
I'll also link to a friend of mine who has some really great tips, fantastic Instagram channels about what you can freeze and tips,
which is basically everything.
Yes. But yeah, exactly. And also but like how to freeze them so you'll definitely use them again, rather than just ending up in your freezer being like, ooh, unknown substance. I'm like, I do this, I put it in my freezer, I'm definitely going to remember what this liquid is. Like, oh my god, is it stock, is it juice? I don't know,
who knows. Milk is also one of the most wasted
that's I think third on the list
products, which is really sad, given if you think about where milk is coming from, and already that's a really valuable resource, and we're throwing that away. And you can freeze milk.
How does that work when it defrosts then?
I don't know, friends do it. Don't freeze it in glass. Obviously that's a bit dangerous. I mean, I have done, you just have to make sure it's not full, but it is more dangerous to a plastic container or something like that. I haven't done it because we don't buy so much, but for bigger families who are like stocking up and buying lots at once, then yeah, it works. If I wasn't doing this business, maybe I would start a fridge freezer business, because I think that the fridge freezer should be designed so that the freezer is the larger portion of the unit and the fridge is the much smaller, higher turnover, things come in and out much faster.
Yes,
the freezer is what we should be using more.
Yeah,
but we don't do that in our society.
No, I agree. My freezer is constantly full.
Yeah, because it's small, there's not a lot of space,
and it's really hard to figure out where things are, to access.
It's helpful to store things and all
those shelves, everything stacked up, and you can't get to things at the back.
Exactly.
I should have gone for the one with drawers, but it was outside of my budget at the time that we purchased it. So if you are looking to buy a new fridge freezer, there are ones with drawers which like are much more accessible for all the things you lose in there. I definitely agree, that would help. Anything else?
There are a few things that I think are really helpful to bear in mind. One is best before dates, which I think is it Morrison's have now or will be removing best before dates on milk or yogurt. Basically, they were obviously put into place so that supermarkets could cover their own butts in terms of making sure that no one got sick for any food they ate, but they're often like weeks and weeks in advance of where they need to be, which means that we're kind of buying new things and throwing out old things unnecessarily. And this is the sort of easiest thing you can do, is just to like trust your senses. Look, do you see any fur on it? If you don't, then maybe smell it. Does it smell funky? And then if you're still not sure, like with milk, I've kept milk a month past its best before date in the fridge, and every day I would sort of look at it, smell it, and then taste it. And if it tastes sour, then maybe don't eat it. But if it doesn't and it tastes like milk, then
ideally
you
pour it on a
can
spoon
eat it
before your cereal, so you're not throwing your cereal.
I did actually once in college. I was like in a bit of a rush and I was having a quick bowl of cereal, and I was like, oh, the cereal tastes like apple. And then I realized afterwards it actually was that the milk was off and I'd had sour milk with my cereal.
I've done
I
it
was fine.
I mean, it used to be that sour milk was just buttermilk, right?
Well, there it is also a thing. So
I don't know if that's true anymore, whether the milk will hurt you. If it doesn't taste good, probably best to throw it out. But ideally.
But the point is, you can trust your senses before you look at the best before dates. A good egg test, for example, they say that eggs last about 3 weeks past their best before. Let's put them in water, make sure the container is clear. If it floats, bad egg. It means that there's too much gas in the shell that's been created as it's gone past the best before date. If it doesn't float, if it's like this, then it's perfectly fine. If it's kind of on its tip, then you know that I maybe wouldn't eat it raw. Definitely like cook it or bake it. And if it's really on the tip, then definitely make sure you're eating it like fully cooked. But as soon as it floats, it means it's a bad egg. That's a useful test.
That is, I remember the floating part at school, learning that, which I found fascinating. But so many people don't know it, and also I didn't really realize that like it was just angled a bit. So I always wonder when it's kind of just wobbling like in the middle. I'm like, But knowing that you could probably cook that and that'll be fine. That's okay.
Or bake it. Just I wouldn't eat it raw. Not
for mayonnaise or
or like sunny side up egg or something like that.
Yes.
So trusting your senses, looking at best before dates, loving your freezer, batch cooking if you can. I think it's such a useful way to save yourself some time during the week. Those are kind of the main things I would suggest. I would say buying less, but it often feels like a bit of a luxury to be able to buy less and like pop to the shops if you need anything, because obviously you get better bulk deals. You can get better deals if you go to big supermarkets, and you don't always live right next door to those.
With this being such a big problem, how's it been growing this business? Has it been easy to just, I'm guessing you can't just like walk around, knock on the door and be like, can I have your pulp, please?
Well, effectively, that's what I've been doing.
Okay, great.
For a few years.
But, I'm guessing you need some refrigerated transportation to move it at least.
Yeah. And so
it depends, maybe not. Like if you're picking up from like, it's only a 20-minute walk, maybe that's perfect. But
it's kind of been evolving as I've gone from sourcing, from my local juice bar or to a canteen to a, larger scale producer. Different producers have different setups. Sometimes they have refrigerated storage, sometimes they don't. It's a big learning curve. The challenge is that the supply chain doesn't exist, so there are no processes in place to facilitate this. So we're kind of not totally making them up as we go, but we are, in the sense that they haven't been made up before. So based on following health and safety guidelines and understanding how long something can be unrefrigerated, or how to quality control raw materials and the containers in which they sit.
I was thinking that, because if it's going to animal feed or to just to be waste to turn into fuel or to be composted, then like it doesn't really matter how clean the bucket is.
Right.
But if it's going to be used for human consumption again, then you want to make sure that that's like properly clean.
Exactly. So those are kind of the bigger challenges, because all that takes a lot of time and testing, and for the suppliers to then be on board with investing their own time and resources into like setting these up with you. And while on the surface people think it sounds like a really good idea, are they always willing to make the investment of time and resource? Not necessarily. So that's been a real challenge.
Some of them are paying to throw away their
which is where we hope to help save producers money. So waste to energy is a service that you pay for as a business. That's why smaller businesses will often just send it to landfill, because it's cheaper and easier. That's kind of where we want to help save people money and show that we can buy it off you, or we can save you money if you're not paying for these collectors. So that's the angle that we're paying for. All these byproducts, because they're sort of fiber heavy or protein heavy, it requires a little bit more TLC to turn into something that's delicious. At home, obviously it's much easier to compost it or throw it away. If you're juicing at home, you can use it, but it just takes a bit more time. Obviously we lead busy lives and we don't always have the time to put into that, which is why with Nibsetc, etc., and just with my own personal journey and starting this business, I want to try and make that easier for people so that they see that as something to look forward to rather than a drag. But also it's a question of using our imagination and being creative. As Doug McMaster says, the founder and creator of Silo, the waste is a total failure of our imagination. And it's true, it's laziness. Like waste doesn't exist in ecosystems, in forests, and it's humans that have created this concept of waste, which is why it sounds waste is very overwhelming and a really big problem. But it's optimistically, I have hope that humans can be the ones to get rid of that concept and work towards more circular economies.
I would say not just laziness, but also a subset of having a very capitalist society focused on growth. There is definitely an element of people in the population, their resources are stretched, so asking them to do some things, I think is...
I totally hear what you're saying, but if we look at the kind of capitalist angle and looking at a business's bottom line, it's in the business's interest to not throw things away and waste something. So if you're buying a carrot, say, for juicing, you've paid a certain amount for that carrot and you will get a certain amount for the juice. But what if you could also get a bit more for the pulp? Not only would you be sort of increasing your revenue, you'd be decreasing the cost per gram of the carrot effectively. You'd be spreading out that cost. So it is in a business interest to not waste. And we've kind of accepted through building speed and convenience that we will have loss, and it's just a sunk cost. I think it is a bit of laziness, to be honest. And in a home point of view, yes, everyone has different needs and different resources, but if we look at like really rural communities, those are communities that don't waste at all because they can't afford to. And so that's, I think, where we can learn the most. And I think it's really important that we respect that and remember that this sort of zero waste movement, it's not something new, it's not something I've created, it's not something anyone today has created. It's kind of one of the oldest standing kind of MOs for life, is just don't waste what you have and make the most of what you have.
I was going to also say that it's a function of the capitalists in the sense that there's incentive for businesses to make the waste invisible to us. So we don't, in this country, generally, apart from the rubbish we put out in our bins that gets collected, we don't see where that goes. And so there's this feeling of freedom when it comes to throwing things away because we don't see or experience the consequences of it, apart from potentially like it costing us £700 more per year that we do in small chunks and perhaps don't like feel immediately. For most businesses, the want for us to purchase more is great. It's helpful for them for us to purchase more than we need because that increases their overall revenue. So I think there's definitely a mismatch in goals there, where whilst manufacturers might want us not to throw away as much, if we throw away less, then we're purchasing less. And I've always found that really confusing. Like, as when I was a buyer, we looked at waste and availability and that balance, and you want to make sure you've got everything that people need, but inevitably that means you're going to have to throw some things away. So there's always a tension there, but also like the frustration I found when I was working as a buyer is this expectation that every year you will have more revenue, greater revenue and greater profits. So somehow you are supposed to increase either the amount that people purchased or increase the price they purchased it at. So you're pushing up prices every year. And then you're trying to also push down the price that you're paying for your suppliers to increase your margin, so that you as the retailer are constantly making more money. But in doing that, you're either having consumers buy things they don't need, you're taking market share from other retailers, or you are pushing on the supply chain who don't have as much power, or you've got like marketing and you're creating new customers as well. So that's always a possibility. But I do find that disconnect quite challenging. I think pushing back as a consumer by purchasing more mindfully, so that we're not throwing away as much stuff. And like, I love what Olio and Too Good To Go are doing. They allow a lot more efficiencies from the system.
Yeah, they're really useful apps. And I recognize that like our product, for example, is a certain price point at the moment, and that's something we're working to improve and make more accessible to more people. But things like Olio and Too Good To Go are sort of helping people at different, you know, in different sort of price brackets. I think that's really important as well.
But at least I think being a premium product, it's not just about like saving the world. You're also actually providing a product that is, in my opinion, far superior to any other granola out there. and so like that, at least then people who have the means to be able to be the first movers to improve the situation, like to invest in what you're doing that helps systems to allow other companies to do that, and bring the price down for everybody else. They're doing it and being rewarded by something delicious and better for them.
I think it's important that we don't feel bad for not being perfect in this as well. You know, we all throw things away.
Because I throw away way more than I would like to.
But we also live in this idea that makes it really easy for us to do so. And like, you know, like you were saying, we're encouraged to always buy more, and we always need more. We're all a part of that system. I guess if I was, you know, coming back to what I would suggest or recommend, if you're trying to cut back your waste at home, I would pick a room or a routine that you enjoy or want to start with, and then look at how can I change this part of my routine, and how can I make a swap here, or how can I, and you know, often the most sustainable things are the things that you already have or that you already do, and you don't need to go out and buy, you know, the trendy scrub for your dishes. You know, you can use what you've already got, what you've already bought, and not feel guilty about that. It's the same for food. You know, use what you've got in the cupboard, and don't feel bad about throwing something away every now and then. You know, it will happen. We just have to start somewhere. Like you say, people who have more of the financial means or more of the time to be able to make these changes and you know, vote with your wallet, I think is really important. Hopefully that will allow businesses like us to then grow and be more accessible and more convenient for more people.
Absolutely. I am going to also link to a couple of chefs who have great recipes on how to use waste, or things that we would otherwise waste, and to the Olio and to Too Good To Go. I'll link to Toast Ale and to the freezer guide that I mentioned for people to look at. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me. If I don't know the answers, I will try and find out, or I'll ask Chloe first and then other people.
We would welcome any questions if there are specific things around food waste at home, or the things you were just dying to know about, you know, upcycling juice pulp or anything like that, or about Nibsetc, etc. Jen will also link to Nibsetc, etc.
Of course. And how to get delicious granola in your life. Is also available at Borough Market.
We sell online. We're at Borough every week.
You might even see Chloe's smiling face there. Say hi if you do.
Do come say hello.
Hopefully this has been inspiring to have a look at your fridge and your freezer and see how you can perhaps slightly adjust your purchasing habits and cooking habits and throwing away habits. Write to your local MP if you don't already have food waste collection and you don't have space. Even if you do have space in your garden to compost, doesn't mean everybody else will, so it's worth a letter to your local MP. I'll also link to how to do that because it's super easy. It takes like less than a minute.
There are also some great restaurants actually in London if you're looking to experience the concept of cooking low waste restaurants. Silo is obviously like the pinnacle of this in Hackney. It's my favorite restaurant in London, not just because it's zero waste. I think it's just brilliant and ingenious and so creative. In fact, the whole space is upcycled in one way or another, which I think is very, very cool. And Apricity has just opened.
Yes.
That's by Chef Chantal Nicholson.
Yes, we're going to be chatting to Chantal at some point because she's got really interesting thoughts about waste in restaurants, but also about like how using plants and
sustainable food systems.
Sustainable food systems.
Really good.
If we think of others, then they will also be in the list. And if you have one and you'd like to reach out and make sure I add it to the blog, then please do that. Thank you so much, Chloe.
Thank you for having me.
It's been fun and interesting and inspiring too. So until next week. I am going to have a good long hard look at myself and my habits when I get home. Hopefully it's inspired you to do the same.
But don't feel guilty about it.
Yes.
One step at a time.
There's enough things to feel guilty about. Do what you can when you can.
Or at least start asking the questions
Yes.
of your suppliers, of your producers,
Yes.
of your shops, and of yourself.
Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you
And
for having me. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. I am excited to share some more news with you in the coming weeks. As promised, the things that need to go to the top of your list to try next. One kind of random thing that I stumbled across. If you happen to be visiting the Museum of Home, which used to be known as the Jeffrey Museum, thankfully has changed because he was a colonizer and a racist and many other things, but a philanthropist who paid for the museum, initially at least. Anyway, it's a great museum. And just a couple of doors down, there is a unassuming grocery called Troy Grocery. It seems to be family run. And I walked inside because my daughter wanted an orange and discovered that there was this full salad bar, including vine leaves and hummus and some cooked foods and falafel. So I ordered a box, and the large box was £5.50, and it was all so delicious. So if you want a cheap eats lunch for takeaway somewhere, then definitely go and check it out. It is a short walk from Layla's shop, which was my other recommendation to you for this week. Great if you want to sit down and eat. They have restaurant as well as tiffin boxes to take away. I haven't tried their savory food yet, although I've heard good things. I bought the lemon bar and the chocolate cake with vanilla frosting, and they were both delicious. A lemon bar, if you didn't know, is a shortbread base, essentially with a lemon curd on top, and then it's all baked. So you bake the shortbread first, then the lemon curd gets baked on top of it, and it becomes this like just soft, zesty, custardy kind of, not custardy as in dairy, but just squidgy and really lemony, and it's delicious. So highly recommend those. They change the things that they sell. There's only 2 or 3 items every day, and they're all different. Another place you can go to get lemon bars, which is very good, is Bake Street, which is also in East London. These recommendations and others are always sent out by email every Wednesday. So if you would like to receive them, you can go to thenextdeliciousthing.com and sign up. Next week, I'll be back with some news. So I look forward to chatting to you then. Take care. And obviously, as always, I wish you very happy eating.